Good evening. Welcome to the Cambridge Union, and to all the freshers in the audience, welcome to Cambridge. Tonight we're here to discuss one of the most contentious moral and ideological issues of our time. We have a fantastic panel of speakers, and for those of you who haven't attended a union debate before, they provide a unique opportunity for you not only to share your perspectives on the issue at hand, but to challenge the speakers on theirs. There are two ways in which you can do this. At any point during the speaker's remarks, please stand up and say point of information or on that point and direct a point in contention with the speakers directly to them, and do keep it as concise as possible. There'll also be opportunities to make a longer speech challenging one of the panel tonight after the first two speeches and before the penultimate speech. More on that later. For now, I would like to welcome you all very warmly to the Cambridge Union for the first debate of the year. Thank you. Our first speaker in proposition of the motion is Peter Hitchens. Mr. Hitchens is a renowned journalist and author, and he is also a former atheist who is now a vocal advocate of the Church of England. Mr. Hitchens.
Well, that was a bit quick, Madam President. Normally there's more messing around before I have to start, but I'll have to get going anyway. I'm sorry, before I begin, to have to say this, because it's in a way a compliment. But one of the problems that my side faces this evening is that our opponents are much too nice. We simply do not have here proper representatives of the real tooth and claw, foaming at the mouth, hatred version of the new atheism, which would, if it were available for you to see, help our side very much. They're all, as I say, far too gentlemanly and retiring for the purposes of this evening. So bear in mind as you listen to them that standing behind them are forces of extreme horribleness, far less appealing than they are. Now, I have to say that in the past few years, I can't remember having burned anybody at the stake, indeed, I speak only from my own religion here, or arranged to have anybody stoned to death. I have excommunicated Anne over a small dispute we had over her writing for Richard Desmond's horrible newspapers, but that was a personal thing, and it hasn't, as far as I know, resulted in her house being infested with cockroaches or any of the other terrible things which are supposed to happen to those excommunicated. In general, the Christian religion has learned over the past several centuries to be tolerant of its opponents and critics, to believe that fundamentally those who disagree with it, oppose it, have other religions, and actually believe there should be no religions at all, are worthy of a hearing and should be left alone to say what they like. And indeed, we would welcome the fact that they say what they like. It strengthens us to have to argue against literate, intelligent, thoughtful opponents who know what they're talking about. Nothing wrong with that. We have abandoned that side of our religion, and I think we all agree that it was a good thing that we did so. That is why the new atheism is so alarming, because, as I wish to make very clear this evening, and I will have to read some stuff out to do this, for which I apologize, but it's necessary, the new atheism is a profoundly intolerant, excommunicatory body of thought which actually desires the suppression and censorship of religion. Now, this seems to me to be such a fundamental criticism, a loathing of somebody else's ideas so strong that you would wish to suppress it and stamp it out, that it is dangerous. And any, whether they be religious or to believe perfect in course an argument win to such an extent that your opponents are destroyed. It's an interesting concept in itself. Let me move on to Philip Pullman, the renowned author of atheist fairy stories. Now apparently busy rewriting bits of the Bible. He has openly said, and many of his supporters are unsettled when they learn of this and quote this remark as reportedly. But I can assure you that he actually did say it in an interview in the Washington Post, February 2001. I have copies of it for anybody who doubts it. Undermine the basis of Christian faith. Again, we're not talking here about making a point which is worth listening to. We're not talking about defending a position. We're talking about undermining the basis of your opponents. Bad enough in itself. Not for me. Bad enough in itself. But then we return to Professor Dawkins, who again, I stress here, is not here, and it's such a pity. In his book, The God Delusion, which is considerably better damage from sexual abuse of children is horrifying to anybody. It is perhaps the crime which even the most liberal-minded, softest-hearted person in this room and in the outside world disapproves of most strongly, the one for which anybody would believe an offender ought to go to prison. Sexual abuse of children. Well, that is the comparison that she is making. Sexual abuse. Arguably less long-term psychological damage inflicted by bringing the child up Catholic in the first place. He's never said. Can anybody not hear me? Oh, okay, right, so I have to stand here like Frank Sinatra. Crooning, right? Well, not like Frank Sinatra, actually, no, it's perfectly good. He also said priestly groping of child bodies is disgusting. But, listen here carefully again, it may be less harmful in the long run, priestly groping of bodies, less harmful in the long run than priestly subversion of child minds. So what he's saying here is that the implantation in the minds of children of religious ideas may actually be worse than the act of physical sexual abuse. This kind of language, given that we are in a country where mobs have been known to storm the offices of pediatricians in the belief that they're pedophiles, this kind of language is inflammatory and intolerant in a dangerous fashion and has to be recognized as such. Now, the next piece of evidence of this, which I have to put before you, takes a little bit longer, and again, I must apologize for this, but it is very important because it exists, it is significant, and it is a crucial part of the argument which my side have put into you tonight. On his own website, he wrote some years ago an article called Religion's Real Child Abuse, in which he made the same point about child abuse being comparable to, about religious education being comparable to child abuse. Counter-demonstration. In this article, which is not subsequently, as far as I know, ever repudiated, he described as superb a polemic delivered as a lecture by Nicholas Humphrey, a distinguished psychologist, which you can find on the web right now if you have the right equipment to do so. It's called What Shall We Tell the Children? Humphrey, for those who are searching for it on handheld devices, has an E in it. It begins with the usual obeisance to freedom of speech, which is always employed by people who are about to attack it. How wonderful it is, how much he believes in it, how very much he feels that it should be preserved. However, he then goes on to say, it is the purpose of my lecture tonight to argue in favor of censorship, against freedom of expression, in favor of censorship, against freedom of expression, and to do so, moreover, it has traditionally been regarded as sacrosanct, which is, you've guessed it, moral and religious education, and especially the education the child receives at home,
not just the education it receives at school, but what its parents are allowed to tell it at home, is something which he believes in censoring, where parents are allowed, even expected, to determine for their children what counts as true, right and wrong. This, Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, is the core of my case. I don't care. I don't care when the slightest bit concerned if my opponent believes what I believe is rubbish, drivel, moronic fantasies, fairy tales, believing in Father Christmas, tooth fairies, and the flying spaghetti monster and all the other abuse, which is constantly leveled at my side. What I do care is that many of them, maybe not represented by the three gentlemen here facing me, but certainly represented by many of the major spokesmen of their cause, they believe that religion is something which should be destroyed and should be destroyed by censorship and suppression. They hate it so much that they would resort to these methods. This is fantastically dangerous. Whatever you think of religion, you should oppose it. And in opposing it, you should support our motion. Thank you very much.
I'd now like to call on our first speaker in opposition of the motion. Tom Shivers is the Daily Telegraph's assistant comment editor, and he'll be opening the case for the opposition side. Thank you, Mr. Shivers.
Does this thing work? Looks like I'm going to have to do the Frank Sinatra thing as well. Thank you, Peter. Is this working? Is everyone? Yeah? Okay. Thanks, Peter, for... I'll start by conceding a few points to my opponents. Yes, some of the people we think of as the new atheists are smug, they are shouty, they can be aggressive, and they do think that religion is to be destroyed. I have to admit that. Sometimes I see Richard Dawkins tweet something awful about Muslims, and I just think, perhaps inappropriately, oh, for God's sake. And yes, sometimes it is true that it's silly to say that religion is a force to be combated. It's not. That's like saying that petrol is a force to be combated. It's not. It is a useful and important thing for millions of people, but it is something that hopefully we can replace and find something better that has all the benefits and fewer harms. I'm not really here to get into an argument about whether or not there's a God. That's not why we're here tonight, and that's not what the debate's about. But I am going to say that increasingly, since the 2011 census and before that, in the British Attitudes Survey and all these things, we've seen that there are more and more atheists in this country. This country is losing its religion, and worldwide the number of atheists is on the rise. If you think that religion is, whatever form, if you think religion is true, if you think there actually is an eternal being, an eternal perfect being that judges you when you die, it decides whether you've been good or bad, then this is largely irrelevant to you whether or not the rise in atheism is caused by the new atheists or the old atheists. It doesn't matter. You think that, presumably, that the rise of atheism in general is a bad thing because it's turning our minds away from the right answers to whatever cosmic questions it is that we're asking? Good Lord. Anyway, sorry, guys. Okay, so I don't expect to convince those people tonight. I'm sorry, Peter, that does include you. But a large and increasing number of people in this country and elsewhere reject that religious premise. They are millions of people in this country who do not believe that we can learn about the nature of reality from the Quran or from the Bible. They do not believe that Christianity or Islam or Judaism contain eternal moral truths. Okay. These people are concerned about the rejection of empirical evidence in favor of dogma. These people are concerned about the sort of fanaticism that leads to violence. They're worried about arbitrary ancient rules that direct modern thinking on complex issues like fertility treatment or cloning. These are the people I'm interested in when I'm talking about whether or not we should regret the new atheism. Lots of these people do regret the rise of the new atheism. There are lots of atheists who will tell you that the strident, smug tones of the atheists are the Richard Dawkins, let's face it, the people we're thinking of, they are counterproductive. They say we need a nuanced debate. They say that we need to take into account the positive things that religion gives. We need to, the hectoring and lecturing tone of the new atheists is counterproductive and only turns people away. Sorry, by the way, for reading from sheet here. I know it's amateurish, but I'm going to do it. Anyway, I'm thinking people like Alain de Botton, who says that religions are too useful, too effective and intelligent to be abandoned to the religious alone. There are also some on the right, such as Douglas Murray, who they don't believe in God themselves, but, it's very useful, Christian values and defend. So these new atheists think that religion is plainly false, but parts of it provide a social function. It's kind of patronizing. They're saying, we educated, intelligent people don't need religion, but it's useful, for the masses, okay? But for all the nuance that these people profess to bring to the arena, the new atheists, as I'm going to call them, are missing the point. The arena that they're in is one that's been built by people like Richard Dawkins. It's been one that's been built by people like Daniel Dennett and Sam Harris and your late brother. And all the other angry people who've won headlines for atheism and rationality and evidence over the last 7 or 8 years that new atheism has been a known term. Okay. If it wasn't for all these guys, there wouldn't be an audience for the sensible, nuanced, on one hand, on the other hand, atheism, the nice guys that Peter Hitchens is talking about. Before these guys go into it, we had to be nice about religion. We had to respect the beliefs. Had to pay attention to the non-overlapping magisteria that Stephen Jay Gould goes on about. We had to play it safe. There's a parallel here with feminism. In the early years of feminism, it was led by women who were just as strident, just as hectoring, just as loud as any of the new atheists. We've since been told there's a backlash against feminism, and it's been caused by these aggressive tactics, but there hasn't been a backlash against feminism. As the psychologist Jean Twenger has shown, the Western world's attitudes towards women have got ever more progressive for decades. As Steven Pinker says, we're now all feminists. We are all feminists now. These early feminists have paved the way for the achievement of their goals and for a much more nuanced debate about sex and gender. Some people deplore their tactics, but it seems that they worked. Please go.
They are fighting against sexism, which in no way can be beneficial. Whereas here they'll be fighting against religion, which can at some time be beneficial.
That's a fair point, but my point is that the tactics worked. I'm not really drawing a point whether one is moral or other. Basically, I'm arguing from the point of view that it is moral and we should, so you're kind of arguing with the wrong guy. But, yeah, okay. From a tactical point of view, it worked for feminists. Can we agree on that? Okay. You're very kind. Now, where was I? Oh, yeah. Okay, similarly, there's now a backlash against the new atheists, we're told. But it's really not the sort of backlash that my opponents would like. The country, the world is still growing more atheist. It is still the fact that religious people are, dying out. We're not all atheists now, but more of us are than ever have been before in the history of the world. And while, of course, I can't prove causation, the British Social Attitude Survey and others show that there was certainly a sudden uptick of speed during the years that the new atheists have been operating. And now the public sphere is full of these rational, atheist, evidence-based voices, people like Simon Singh, people like Brian Cox, people like Ben Goldacre. There are comedians like Robin Ince and Tim Minchin and all that lot who've mined science and secularism. And,
Point of information.
Please.
I haven't gathered from this so far whether you believe that parents should be allowed to teach religion, their religious beliefs, to their children.
I think...
Do you think they should be allowed to do so?
Sorry, please. What am I putting?
Should always be taught.
Should truth always be taught?
Truth should always be taught. Then when they grow up, they will discover truth. What else is grown for that sake? Why else go to college? Let them hear the untruth at home and in the church. When they grow up, they'll come to their senses.
Respectfully, I think I disagree. Okay. Well, please, give them a round of applause. You want to? I think you would agree as well that you can't teach everything. There has to be some limits on what you teach children. I probably would disagree with Professor Dawkins on what is allowed, but you couldn't teach that it's all right to go around murdering people, presumably, and you'd think that was child abuse if they did.
It's always a very good responsive question to ask another question, but it isn't actually an answer, it's an evasion. The question is, do you think that parents should be permitted to teach their children their religious beliefs, or do you think they should be prevented from doing so? What do you think, following that, what do you think of Professor Dawkins, who obviously believes that it's the equivalent of sexual
child abuse? I think he probably went a bit far, but I tend to agree with him that there is a limit to how far you can go.
There's a limit.
I think so.
There's a limit to what I can teach children.
Yes, there is. Anyway, may I continue? Thank you. Thank you very much. I've entirely lost me. This thing is very loud. Sorry?
Only an Oxford the lecture.
Yeah. Totally forgotten where I was. Sorry. Okay. Feminism, yes, excellent, marvelous, Steven Pinker. All right. Okay, backlash against new atheism. The country and the world is growing more atheist. We're not all atheists, but we are more than ever before, and the public sphere is more full of more rationalist voices. Okay? I put it to you that these voices have become emboldened, they've become encouraged by people like Richard Dawkins. I think that if you want, these things have built a new platform for other more nuanced atheists to stand upon. Yes, it's true that much of the argument, what you might call the atheist community, has moved on to much more nuanced debates, and nuanced debates such as the perfectly reasonable one that Peter brings up about whether or not we should be allowed to teach children Catholic stuff at school, as I suppose they probably should. But there is evidence now that people know that religions do things like improve social cohesion, and belief in a supernatural judge makes us more likely to behave well. These aren't really the things, I admit, that the new atheists have focused on. But the things they do focus on are still relevant to the same debates. Religious beliefs still have costs as well as benefits. They create in-groups and they create out-groups. Some of them have deeply regressive social attitudes towards women and gay people. They're sometimes suspicious or downright hostile of some of science's most unarguable findings. Thank you very much. Okay. And this, sorry about this. Okay. The most fundamental point, though, is religious beliefs, we can probably all agree, many of us, are probably false. The people who say, at least the atheists who say they don't believe in a God themselves, they say they believe in the value of a belief. And so they're saying to people, we think this thing is a lie, we think this is an untruth, and we should tell the public anyway. This is a deception, it is a lie. We should be honest about what we're doing here. So yes, sometimes I disapprove when Dawkins tweets something crass about Muslims. Sometimes I wish he'd stop trying to address complex issues in 140 characters, but I don't regret what he's done to public debate in this country. I want the public debate to be based on empirical evidence, not on ancient dogma. I want it to be based on statistically supported facts, not on spurious eternal truths. If you want these things too, then however distasteful you might find some of the tactics the new atheists have employed, you have to admit they've worked. Because if you're enjoying the results of the rise of the new atheists, why would you regret it? Thank you.
Now it's time for the students to take part in the debate. We'd like you to raise points in proposition, opposition, or abstention. And if you side with Mr. Hitchens that the rise of new atheism has done more harm than good, then please raise a point in proposition. Please wait for a microphone to get to you and say your name and college before you begin your point. 1 minute, please.
I am Hatice, a medic from King's, and I have a question for Mr. Tom. Basically, Mr. Peter has asked if parents should teach religion to children or not, whether you're thinking. And you said there is a limit to what parents can teach. Well, if you believe in statistics as an atheist and science, so there is no limit in science, why there should be a limit of children learning a religion? But his question wasn't to stop your children learning something else. It was specifically religion. And my question is, so if there is beyond science, so why there shouldn't be a beyond religion? So this was my question. Yeah.
Can I take a point in opposition?
John Stuart Mill reminds us that we vivify truth through its collision with error. A point of view is only a true belief at the point at which you can explain why it is you do not believe the opposite. For millions of people, religion is like any anatomical feature. It's something you get from your parents and you're not quite sure what to do with. Crucially, it's only when you have to respond to a challenge like that of Richard Dawkins, like that of Christopher Hitchens, an atheist challenge, that you know whether it is something that is meaningful for you or whether it's something you can simply discard. That's a challenge to which people need to respond, and to which very often they will only respond if it is shouted loudly. Surely that's a reason to, at the very least, tolerate the rise of new atheism. Thank you.
And I'll now take a point in abstention.
Harry Peto, Clare College. The reason why I'm abstaining is because I regret some things that new atheism has represented and not others. The reason why I don't regret sometimes the rise of new atheism is for two reasons. Firstly, because I think it's been very important in giving confidence to people to reject what they're told. And I think that religion has often been responsible for indoctrinating people. And I think that's not, I don't think you have to be atheist to think that. I think that organized religion is often responsible. Maybe it's off scripture, but that's the case. And I think that new atheism has been important in giving people the confidence to make philosophical and scientific advancements, and that's certainly true for people who've been freed from their chains. And secondly, I think that it will eventually lead to a better moral system, even though it's in its early stages at the moment, like with the feminist movement. But the reason why I do regret it is because I think that the new atheists, at the moment at least, dismiss the moral arguments of religion in a very, very crass way. You'll often YouTube people like Stephen Fry or Christopher Hitchens and so forth who'll just say, oh, what about the slavery? Oh, what about the suppression of women? Yes, we know about these things. Let's move on and think about the more subtle points of religion. And I think Alain de Botton, I know he's been knocked earlier, but I think he makes a very good point about this. I think he says quite clearly, yes, there are problems with religion, but actually there are lots and lots of very valuable and very subtle moral lessons that lots of religions has taught us, and that's why it survived. The rubbish religions normally don't survive. The ones that survive do have important moral lessons, and that's why I regret that part of it. But I think one day maybe it will be very useful, which is why I'm abstaining. Thank you.
And another point in proposition of the motion.
Axel Landin, Selwyn College. Mr. Chivers has told us basically quite at the very conclusion of his... Is it not? Sorry, can you hear me now? Mr. Chivers has told us at the conclusion of his speech, quite a simplistic argument which seemed to be the end justifies the means. We enjoy the benefits, so how can we regret the rise? Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I mean, for example, we can enjoy the benefits of class privilege. It doesn't mean that we don't regret its existence. And I think also that if you look at some of the things that somebody like Sam Harris has said, that torturing Muslims is okay, that we have declared war on millions of Muslims, and these are quotes from some of his writings, what you're seeing is not the logical and rational analysis that you have praised in your defense of new atheism, but it is actually, there's nothing logical or rational about what is basically base prejudice. Thank you.
I think I'll take a point from the gallery now, so up here.
Cheers. I'm Lawrence from Magdalen. If atheists are as dogmatic in their beliefs as religious people often are, then surely they're as good or as bad as each other. Surely the debate about whether one should destroy the other, if they're both dogmatic in their beliefs and they're saying we're right and no one else is because based on what they say and think, then surely they're as good or bad as each other. So I abstain from this.
Yes, please do.
this is something that it's kind of bores me actually. That the atheism and religion are just the same thing. It's the parallel everyone draws all the time, but it's bizarre. It's like you can draw this easy parallel because there are famous figures who are sort of figureheads, and then they've got lots of excitable followers, and that's basically what it comes down to. It's like Richard Dawkins is the Pope, and all his followers are his atheist little minions. It's not quite. It's not the same. You're just drawing a cheap parallel with the cult of celebrity. It's like saying there's Saint Justin of the Believers. There is no straight comparison. Sorry, I just wanted to say that.
I think we probably have time to take one quick round of floor speeches before we move on with the main debate. So, in proposition? Opposition?
I would just like to address Peter Hitchens' point about what Richard Dawkins said, comparing sexual molestation and child abuse in terms of indoctrination. And the context that was actually referring to was the case of a 6-year-old child who was in a religious school and taught vehemently that her friend, who was not a Christian, died at the age of 6 and was made to believe that her friend was going to then burn in hell forever. And that mental anguish lasted with this child as long as they were religious. And it's just not a nice thought.
Since I'm off, I probably won't have another chance once more. What was wrong with the old atheism? Why did we ever have to have the new atheism? The old atheism was fine. The old atheism just believed that you could be an atheist if you wanted to. The new atheism believes in you can't believe in God because we won't let you, we won't let you teach your children. That's what it's really about. That's what the new atheism is. It's a totalitarianism in the making.
Final point.
Hi, I'm Anam, and I'm from Newnham College. I'm no expert on Dawkins, but I feel that one of the points that he's trying to make and why he comes across as so aggressive towards religion is because it starts to it makes claims about the nature of reality and so forth. And then it puts those claims on a pedestal that no one can reach. So I think what he's trying to say when he's so aggressive towards religion is that so that people can think about these things in different ways, so that people can think about these claims from other perspectives, we have to make it not sacred. Because if we keep saying that this is sacred and you can't talk about it, then there's never going to be free talk about it. So the reason that he's so aggressive towards it is so that there's more free debate around it. And I feel that that's a point that's maybe being misrepresented or not talked about. Thank you.
We'll now move on to the speeches, and if you stored up a floor point that you'd like to use to address one of the speakers, you're welcome to stand up after the first minute of their speech and raise a point of information succinctly said in about 15 seconds so that they can respond to your challenge on the spot. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome the second speaker in proposition of the motion. Tariq Ramadan is a professor of contemporary Islamic studies at Oxford University.
Do I need the mic? I don't need the mic? No, I'm asking, do I need the mic? No? It's okay. Thank you. Thank you. My main point here is really to be clear about the terminology that we are using, because we are not talking about atheism, we are talking about the new type of atheism that we are facing today. which once again, in what you said about atheism, it's useful. You know, I did my first PhD on Nietzsche's philosophy, who said God is dead, and I learned a lot about my own religion. And this type of atheism is something which is based on knowledge and understanding, a deep knowledge. The problem that we have today is with the new type of atheism is three things that are always in the discussion. The first is, oh, we are talking about science and complexity, and you don't understand that, you religious people. Second, we are talking about rationality. You are people of faith, we are people of mind. And third is an understanding of we are open-minded by definition, because if you say no to God, it means that there is no sacred, so our minds are open to reality. And then you come to analyze these three statements and these three postulates, and you understand that there is something wrong in the whole discussion. First, if you come to discuss religion and you read the books, you understand that there is a very simplistic understanding of what religion is all about. Very simplistic. They are coming with an understanding of, we are talking about God, angels, rituals. They don't come to the deep understanding of what spirituality is, what freedom is in the spiritual traditions, what religions are from not the rituals, but the deep understanding of what the self is. So reducing religions to make our mind appear as complex, scientific, is very unscientific. It's very simplistic. So in all these books that we are facing, sometimes I'm reading things about Islam, and says, what is he talking about? What is this? If this was to go from the first year in theology, he would fail. And they are failing. Yes, I know why you are saying this, because you are saying this from a very arrogant view. I am coming to you. Let me just... So the knowledge of spirituality here, and if I'm talking about, atheism, Nietzsche, Feuerbach, these philosophers, yes, this is where I'm challenged. But with this, I'm not. I'm sorry. Very simplistic, and they are far from touching the real issues. And as it was said, very much the point is, we want to destroy you. We're not challenging what you believe. We want to destroy the foundation. So the mindset is problematic from the very beginning. And the substance, no, just because I have lots of things to say. Sorry about that. Second point is about rationality. It's as if we are talking here with people who have the monopoly on rationality. We know what we are talking about. The new people of religion and religions are far from. But this is a new ideology. Just to talk the way they are talking about rationality is a new ideology. And as we have seen right now, I'm not going to talk about Dawkins. We had a discussion here with him. But even with you, in the way you deal with religious people and religions, it's arrogant. It's arrogant. And arrogance is the end of a dialogue. It's the end of pluralistic society. You are dangerous for pluralistic society. Go ahead.
Is it not arrogant to pretend you know the truth and influence parents to teach their children?
Have you heard that from me? Well, I said I believe. You are telling me I know the truth. I don't know. But yes. let me say I don't know. Can I? Sure. And I let you say you don't know. So between people who don't know, let us so. So this is where the problem that I have is very much about this arrogance that I see in New Atheism. So once again, I want to make clear that the rise of this New Atheism is very much based on the way, when we are talking about Dawkins, the way he's looking, and sometimes you are looking at us, is problematic because I saw in this mindset something which has to do with dogmatism. And dogmatism is a binary vision of reality. We are right, so you are wrong. You just said it right now. Let the young people get the untruth. They will get truth later. What are you talking about? How can you say this to parents? How can you say this? No. Yes, that's fine. But the way you are saying, let them get untruth, at least say in a skeptical way, let them learn. And we'll see later. But in fact, your position... And the truth is your truth. That's fine. Okay, I got it. So, the last thing, which is the last point, The last... If I may finish. So I'm happy to talk to some... Okay, that's fine. Okay. So let me So here, it's like a new religion that we are facing. And what you said in this, when you were talking, you say, we have more and more atheists. So it's as if you are counting. So the fact is proselytizing. So, no, but the problem is this one. As much as I am, from within my tradition, saying to people, don't try to convert, I would ask you, what is your point? You try to convert people to atheism, or you try to convert people to open-mindedness, discussion, and dialogue? From what I hear now, it's not this. You are not opening the dialogue. You are just imposing something which is, your truth is not a truth. My truth is that there is no truth, so it's still a truth. So at the end, it's a religion that we are facing. You have a religious, dogmatic mindset, which is problematic in our discussion, because it's difficult for us to come to something which is, how come can I get this? People saying, or just asking the question, we want to know what you are teaching your children, so you have the right to say this to people? Where are we? Where are we? In which society? Is this pluralism? You are going to ask and to decide what we can teach our children? You are dangerous. You are dangerous. So let me finish, please. So this is where I think that the last point that I wanted to say is, you know, the problem that I have with New Ageism is that you are the objective allies of people within religions that are formalistic and dogmatic. You are talking to one another. And the point that I want to make is you are not helping the needed debates that we are looking for today. Because what we need is to talk about the deep concepts, about freedom, about rationality, about the relationship between God and the self, freedom and rituals, and about rationality and faith. In your decision, in your position, we are facing something which is a very dogmatic approach, a very narrow-minded discussion where we cannot get this discussion. And let me tell you something where I want you to understand that. Because it's not by accident that it's coming. You know, all of you know, that the coming and the settling down of Muslims in the West today is giving people who are at the forefront, translating in the name of science something which is a xenophobic sentiment based on science. And if you agree with this, let me tell you something. No, let me tell you something. That if you go in this direction, you should know your responsibility in the name of science to support xenophobic ideologies. And if you agree with this and you support this, I think that you are doubly dangerous. And please, please, don't be patronizing with me. It's my truth. Get it. Thank you.
Our second speaker in opposition of the motion is Professor Hugh Mellor. Professor Mellor is a philosopher and the former Pro-Vice-Chancellor of Cambridge University.
Thank you, Madam. Is this microphone working? Thank you. Madam President, I shouldn't be living down to the public reputation of my subject if I didn't quibble at the wording of the motion. The fact is that what the first proposer addressed was the new atheists, not the new atheism. Nothing new about atheism. Atheism, since it's not been entirely clear what's been said so far, is simply the doctrine that there are no supernatural agents who are responsible for the creation of the world, its continued existence physically, and its moral ordering. That's atheism. There's nothing new about it. There's a debate about the value, or otherwise, the vehemence with which it has recently been expressed, but for all the quotes that the proposer has produced from overly vehement and strident and arrogant atheists, I wouldn't have any difficulty matching, as members of this House will know, similar quotes on the other side, which are not representative. I suggest we confine ourselves to discussing the rise if it is a rise, the social survey suggested, of atheism.
I don't know if you need to take my name. I was just wondering, do atheist churches count as new atheism, or is that part of the old atheism? I know church probably isn't the correct term, but when you gather in a building, sing hymns and have sermons, even if it's on atheist subjects, it seems just like a new brand of religion. Thank you.
Well, it may well be, which is why I'd rather stick to what I said, which is the rise of atheism. How it's portrayed, how people who sympathize with it organize their lives and organize a social life around it, seems to me to be neither here nor there. The point is there is an incompatibility between doctrines which are held by atheists and by theists on the very issue that I made. And the question is not on the assumption that on the whole atheism is rising in the UK. I'm fairly sure it's not rising globally. And there's a point that I do want to make about the difference between atheism and secularism. Atheism is the doctrine that I said it was, and some people hold it, many people don't. And I'm taking a rise in it to be a rise, allegedly a rise in the proportion of people who hold this doctrine. Secularism is a thesis about the state or about society. The thesis being that it is not the business of the state or society either to prescribe or to proscribe the expression and practice of any religion. And I'm all for it, as indeed the proposer is. This society, for example, is in that sense secular. It is not the business of the society, and it should not be, to prescribe or proscribe the expression of views representing any religion or atheism or any views at all on controversial matters, provided, of course, they are not slanderous, provided, of course, they do not incite to violence or to breaches of the peace. And the point about that I want to make about that is that it is quite possible for societies and states to be secular and most of the population to be theists. The Constitution of the United States is a secular constitution. It is not the business of the state to determine religion, despite the fact that the majority of the population of the United States are in fact theists. Most of them are Christians. The same is true officially, I believe, of France. The same is true, I believe, of India. And it is true of this state, of this society, and that is rather important. Secularism in a state or society is a very good thing, precisely because what it does is enable a freedom of religion, of expression and the practice of religion, and of the lack of it to occur. And I'm going to take it for granted that that is a good thing. But the question is this, then, whether, and if we return to the UK, it's true that the UK is officially not secular, it's officially Anglican. But in practice, it's pretty well secular, for all practical purposes. And that has nothing to do, that state which I value in the UK, that state which I value in the society, has nothing to do with the proportion of the members who hold any particular religious belief or are atheists.
Militant, abusive intolerance is not the distinguishing mark which separates the new atheism from all the atheism before it. Then can you tell me what it is?
I'm not interested in the new atheists. I'm interested in the content of what they're advertising. I mean, my content. Well, I know you did. That's not. That's not content. That is mode of presentation.
The discussion here is about the new atheism. Can you tell me what else distinguishes the new atheism from the atheism?
The new atheism is the same as the old atheism. What is different is the manner in which it is presented, as the speaker says, by certain atheists. I could match that. I'm not going to attack Islam, for example, on the manner of expressing it, which has rightly attracted condemnation from many Muslims and others. What matters, what we are talking about, is atheism, which is a doctrine. And I'm concerned with the question of the rise of atheism at New World in society. So the question is, in my view, what should be, the adjective new should be applied to rise, if anything. So. Well, proselytization is not a peculiarity of atheism. It is on the whole a bad thing, whoever practices it, if it's practiced immoderately, intolerantly, and with an object of destroying the secular character of the state, by which I mean a character of the state which allows religious freedom, freedom to hold and to not hold religions. That's what I'm concerned to defend, and I think that new atheism is a very bad expression. We've had quotations which I've said I could match on the other side, so I would like, if I may, to continue. The question that seems to me to be this: why, in a secular, virtually practically secular state and society, and this society with a capital S in particular, should we regret a rising proportion of atheists? One reason we should not is simply that you disagree with people. I disagree with a lot of people. Some of my best friends are theists. I disagree with a lot of my friends over matters of religion, of politics, of taste, of modes of expression, and so on. And that is neither here nor there. I mean, that is my business, and I might regret, in some sense, that they are misled, but that is not serious. I mean, for example, I feel mildly resentful that people who believe in an afterlife will never discover that they are wrong. Whereas if I am wrong and believing that there isn't, I probably will. But that's not serious. The two things, the only thing that should concern a secular society like this one about the rising proportion of atheists is whether that produces a social threat, a threat to the values and states of society, and I don't think it does. One argument is the connection which is often made between morality and religion. I have to say, it's often held, I think mistakenly, that morality depends on religion. This is not true. The major religions in this country are revealed religions, which is to say that their moral authority derives from sacred texts, the Torah, the Bible, the Quran. Now, before you buy a text which makes moral prescriptions, you need to satisfy yourself that the author of the text, natural or supernatural, has moral authority. And that you can't do just on the basis that it's in the text. You have to either assess that text of what it says and infer the value of the author or not. So far from morality presupposing religion, religion presupposes morality. And I think what I would finally say in conclusion, that I think that the secular organization to which I belong, secular charities to which I and other people support indifferently, I mean, things like Oxfam, Save the Children, there's no evidence that atheists are worse at this, there's no evidence that they're worse at bringing up their children. But what is true is that powerful theist organizations have been known and are still disposed to try to use legislation and public pressure to force on those who do not subscribe to their religion the practices which their religion entails. And this involves a pressure which, on the whole, I think threatens the freedom of religion in ways which atheist, that is secular organizations, do not do so. So I see no reason for this House to regret the rise in the distribution of in the rise in proportion of atheists in the population, since they are not likely, unlike the proponents of one religion, to try to suppress the practice and expression of the views of other religions. And so I see no reason why members of this House, devoted as we all are, I assume, to the secularism of this society, should regret the rise of atheism. Thank you.
And before we move on to the final two speakers to close the case for either side, we're going to do another couple of rounds of floor speeches, so please share your perspectives now. I'm going to take a point in proposition, and a hand went up very quickly in the gallery.
Ollie Wetton, Peterhouse. I'd just like to take issue with the last opposition speaker. He said that he wasn't going to deplore the rise of what was basically Islamist extremism. But I think that the rise of new atheism can actually be compared to the rise in Islamist extremism, because they both are equally intolerant of the other sides in the arguments, and therefore I think that is actually rather an apt description. He's attempted to delimit the difference between new atheism and atheism, but I think that since the debate is about new atheism, this is actually quite an apt comparison to draw. Thank you very much.
And a point in opposition of the motion?
It's a mistake to characterize any group by its most extreme proponents. It would be a mistake to characterize atheism by its fedora-wearing, neck-beard-growing, sort of Dawkins God delusion bashing proponents. It would be a mistake to characterize social conservatives by the immigrant-hating, gay-bashing Daily Mail. It would be a mistake to characterize feminism by the borderline misandrist people of the very, very far left. And so it seems that when we say that new atheism is characterized simply by followers of Dawkins, of Hitchens, of Harris, of Dennett, that we're ignoring all the moderate people, all the people who've had their eyes opened to a more critical view of Scripture, a more critical view of their own religions, which they have been brought up with, which new atheism has brought into the daylight. Simply saying, oh, we don't particularly like Dawkins because he says some nasty things sometimes, doesn't manage to condemn an entire movement which has brought a great deal of critical thinking and rationality into the world.
And now a speech in, before a response.
Yes, that's exactly the point of our discussion. New atheism, this is a movement of people who are following some of the figures that you are talking about, and in the public arena, in our discussion, this is the way they are. Now, what you are talking about is a very long tradition of atheism where we have people discussing and argumenting. We don't have a problem with this. We have a problem with the new trend you are talking about, where what we have is people telling you, in the name of science, in the name of our truth, which is a scientific truth, you can't go ahead with your religion. So this is where we have new intolerance. This is what we are talking about. So this is what we regret, and this is the motion, to be clear.
The love of old atheism, expressed by the other side. Old atheism is lovely, new atheism is bad. But when old atheism was there, it was treated with the same contempt and the same intolerance as new atheism is treated. Nothing new about the religious. They are the same.
And a point in abstention.
Sorry, not necessarily abstention, but sort of neutral. Just continuing the line you were going down, there was someone here kind enough to give the context of Mr. Dawkins, Professor Dawkins. Thank you. Do you happen to know if the girl in question committed suicide? You can't? Okay. No, okay. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense that. And it seems to me that, I mean, a lot of people are sexually abused and commit suicide. You've taken a very extreme, or rather Professor Dawkins has taken a very extreme example of the detrimental effect on a young girl of religious indoctrination and has said that's as bad as sexual assault. But the psychological effect on people who are sexually assaulted in the worst cases is many, many times worse than what you're talking about. And maybe Mr. Hitchens will correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that what new atheism does is it takes extreme examples, precisely as you were talking about. It takes extreme examples of religion and dresses them up as normal and then says, look, we're so much better than this by portraying a moderate version of atheism. Thank you.
Proposition point, please. Oh. First a response from Mr. Hitchens and then a point in proposition.
All the
Dawkins says in his book is that he made this point at a meeting in Dublin, and it got rather good reception, so he's been making it ever since. That's the context I wish people would stop assuming that this was not a general view which he has stated and which leads on to his recommendation of the other article which I cited, which specifically calls for the interference of the state between parents and their children in the matter of religious education. As for whether militant atheists have ever blown anybody up on a bus, I wouldn't be qualified to say. Militant atheists, when they ran the government of the Soviet Union, murdered thousands of priests and nuns. They didn't need any buses to do it. They had the state machine to do it with. Militant atheists, when they have the state machine, are very, very militant indeed. That's the new atheism.
And a point from the gallery in proposition. Can you wait for a microphone to get to you? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sid. I'm a fresher. I'm from Queens and a new member. I'm also from India, and I would say almost a devout Hindu, which is, in my opinion, a very tolerant religion, one that has been a patron of math, science, thousands of years before any other culture pretty much got there. It's also a culture where we hand out weed at temples and pretty much came up with a hash brownie. And so my issue here is not whether God exists or not. My issue is that people like Professor Daniel Dennett at MIT, people like Professor Richard Dawkins, will want to call themselves, quote-unquote, the Brights, because they have a view that God doesn't exist. And apparently, that view is against the intolerance that religions like mine are supposedly sprouting around the world, whether it's just that kind of intolerance that they're really sprouting. Now, therefore, it's not, I think, a debate of whether or not the illiteracy in India is because of Hinduism. I think it's a debate that they think that they are superior and that there's a direct causation between my belief in a God and the sort of evils that are in my country. So I think it's the intolerance on their part, trying to combat the intolerance on supposedly my part, that I have a problem with the new atheism.
A point in opposition, please. Richard.
Richard Parkins, Trinity College. Well, I'm not quite Richard Dawkins, I'm a couple of letters different. But since he's not here to defend himself, I'm going to try and defend his position a little bit. His argument about the education of children is that humans have particularly evolved an ability for children when they're young to accept and learn from what their elders tell them, and that this is a necessary and essential part of humanity because it's the way we have been able to pass sophisticated cultures on through our destinations and build on what previous generations have done, which no other kind of animal has ever been able to do. So his concern is that religious people are telling their children when they're young and impressionable that certain revealed facts are absolute truth and that everything else is false. Now, Richard Dawkins, I think, would not object, as Christopher Hitchens has accused him of doing, of parents teaching their children about religion, just as he would not object to parents teaching their children about atheism. What he objects to is parents teaching their children that one of these views is absolutely true and every other view is absolutely false.
And a point in abstention.
Kate Kirk, Hughes Hall. Unlike, I'm a third year, so I'm not a fresher, but unlike all you freshers, hopefully, I have 3 children. Now, obviously, the education question is quite intriguing to me, because I would love to know how you police parents educating their children. You have all come, all you freshers, and those of us who are slightly more jaded still, we're here because we want to ask questions. We want to find things out. this is what children do. This is what you've been doing since you learnt how to speak. So I'm very curious as to how we can stop parents answering their children's questions, or how we can change the way parents respond. And if you take it to the extreme, we're getting into Big Brother territory and, you know, what are you saying inside your house?
It's now time to move on to the final two speeches of the debate. I'd like to welcome Anne Atkins to close the case for the proposition. Anne is a broadcaster and author, and she regularly features on Radio 4's Thought for the Day.
I have to repeat what Hugh Mellor said. Is this microphone working? It is, isn't it? Yeah. When I was asked if I would like to debate this motion this evening, I initially asked if I could debate for the opposition. Why should I regret new atheism? I am passionate about free speech. I am very grateful that I live in a liberal democracy where we can believe what we like and we can say it how we like. I'm very proud of these aspects. Until I heard, I mean, I'm still proud of those aspects, but I wanted to argue for the opposition until I heard Daniel Trilling being interviewed on the radio just after being appointed as editor for the New Secularist on the radio a few weeks ago. And he said the one thing he was committed to combating, ladies and gentlemen, was the new atheism. This is an articulate leading atheist. Because, he said, he used to be proud to call himself an atheist, and he's now ashamed of the term because it is so associated with bigotry, with prejudice, with intolerance, with fundamentalism. It won't do. Professor Mellor, Professor Mellor. I mean, I wondered how somebody as civilized and intelligent as Hugh Mellor actually could be arguing for the opposition. He's done it by very clever sleight of hand, saying, I'm not arguing for the new atheism, I'm arguing for atheism and secularism. We are not here to discuss the old atheism or secularism. Many of us would be very much in favor of a secular society. I'm not sure that I would have a problem with it at all myself. We are here to discuss the new atheism, which is a completely different kind of atheism. And I am here to propose this motion because I very much value free, intellectually rigorous debate. Now, I'm not a great tennis player. When I play tennis, I like to play with somebody who is at least as good as I am, and preferably a bit better. You cannot have a decent game of tennis if you play against somebody who can't even get the ball back over the net. It's not a game. And I have debated from time to time with new atheists, and that's a bit what the experience is like. I want a decent opposition, because that's how I sharpen my own views, how I discover the weaknesses in my faith, perhaps how I work out whether or not it's rational. I'll just digress with a little anecdote. Oh, my microphone's unhappy. Am I doing the wrong thing? No, it's okay. Sorry? I was asked by the BBC a few years ago to present a programme called Why People Hate Christians. And my producer, maybe it's not a mystery, said to me, what I want you to do is to interview a few people representing positions that traditionally hate Christianity. We'll invite Peter Tatchell for the gay community, Polly Toynbee for the liberal secularists, Richard Dawkins for the scientific community. I might argue with that representation, but I'll come on to that in a minute. And I said, yeah, great. These are all very good people to debate with. So he went off to invite them, and a few days later he rang me back and said, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but Professor Dawkins has asked me to find out your credentials. What books have you written on the subject, or academic papers have you published on the subject of science and Christianity? Now, I am not an expert. I am not a scientist. I'd happen to know a little bit about it because, as it happens, the person who taught me to read my Bible was my older brother, who is now Professor of Nanomaterials at Oxford. And I also knew, and is still a Bible-believing Christian very much, and I also knew that Professor Dawkins had refused to debate with my brother, who lives in the next street. They're both professors at the same university. And if he looks down on my brother, who is Professor of Nanomaterials, of course he would not debate with an idiot like me. So I said to the producer, I'm sorry, he won't agree to come on the programme. I have no expertise whatsoever. We'll have to go for our second choice, Peter Atkins. He said, okay. He hung up and rang back within minutes. I think it was under 5 minutes. And he said, it's a very odd thing, but when I told Richard Dawkins that you know absolutely nothing about the subject, He agreed to come on your program. So clearly, not everybody likes worthy opposition. Very interestingly, one of the first things he said to me as soon as I walked into his house, we'd allowed an hour for the interview, and we only needed the first 3 minutes, because the first thing he said pretty well was, no scientist can believe this rubbish. And I said, what rubbish? And he said, well, the miracles, the resurrection, that sort of nonsense. And I said, okay, what about Professor John Polkinghorne? Now, you, ladies and gentlemen, will know that Sir John Polkinghorne is perhaps our most eminent physicist, extremely accomplished scientist with far weightier credentials than Richard Dawkins. And I said, what about John Polkinghorne? He said, he doesn't believe this nonsense, the resurrection, walking on water and stuff. And I said, well, look, okay, I may not have credentials in this area, but I can read, and I've just read a couple of his books, and he does believe in the resurrection. He does believe in the feeding of the 5,000. He does believe these things actually happened. Richard Dawkins stared at me for a minute and said, well, I can't have any respect for him as a scientist then. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not rational debate. No dogs are black. Well, I've got a black spaniel. Well, he's not a dog then, is he? Now, I regret the new atheism, not the old atheism, which I respect, not secularism, which I also respect. I regret the new atheism for 3 reasons. One, it is based on a lie. It is based, ladies and gentlemen, on something which I thought we'd grown out of at least 150 years ago, which I grew out of when I was so high, that Christianity or any faith and science are incompatible. This is nonsense. If it were true, how could somebody like Sir John Polkinghorne believe the truths in the Bible if science and Christianity were incompatible? They are non-overlapping magisteria. Lord Rees of this university here has said they are discussing different things. The great mystery of the universe is why this is here, and this is something that science does not address. If they were incompatible, let me just read you a few names of eminent scientists who are all Christians. Dennis Alexander of this university, molecular biologist. Sir John Horton, Polkinghorne I've mentioned, Simon Conway Morris, Professor Francis Collins, Sir Gillian Prance, Sir Colin Humphreys, Sir Brian Heap.
Beyond naming individuals, beyond crucifying individuals like Dawkins, can you address the logic behind the critique that new atheism makes on religion? Can you address it logically beyond stooping to attack an individual?
Listen. Okay, hands up a chemist here. Any chemists here? Hands up a chemist. Okay, if I asked you to analyze this, what would you say it was? A piece of paper. Okay, hands up anybody here who's reading English. And you might say, I asked somebody at dinner, because I was sitting next to a chemist, and he said carbon and hydrocarbon and tin, right? Okay, anybody who's reading English? Right, okay, I hand you this, and I say, it starts, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Well, how would you analyze this? What is it? A poem, it's a sonnet by Shakespeare. Are those two things contradictory? No, they are not. Ladies and gentlemen, you know this. Now, the next reason why I regret the new atheism is it is simply intellectually lightweight. It really is. It's fluff. It is featherweight. There are no brains in the new atheist movement to compare with those names I've read to you. The only one with any credentials at all in this country in that area is Dawkins himself. And frankly, the only reason he is an FRS is because he's good at popularizing science, which is a very good thing, and he does it very well, and I admire him for it. But he is not, I'm sorry, I've got a lot to get through, and you've already had a point. He is not, you ask any serious scientist, there are no great creative breakthroughs that Richard Dawkins has made, as some of these people have made. It is not a serious intellectual movement. And the third reason, which is my most important point, and if I have time, I will come to you, so I've just got a lot to get through, which is the most important point, is that this is dangerous. Peddling a lie is always dangerous. The lie that faith and science contradict one another is simply that and no more. Now, why is it dangerous? My brother tells me that in the States now, which is further advanced than we are on this, young people with an aptitude for science, if they come from a faith background, I haven't got my specs on so I can't read it luckily, if they come from a faith background, feel that they can't become scientists. That matters. If young Christians or young Muslims or whatever it may be feel they can't become scientists, we are denying ourselves scientists just as much as if we said women couldn't become scientists or people with black skin couldn't become scientists. This really matters. And finally, what does the new atheism stand for? I asked Dennis Alexander, one of the names I read out here, who's of your university, a very eminent scientist and a Bible-believing Christian. I said, why, if this is such tripe, why do people buy the God delusion? And incidentally, if you're ever curious, as I was, as to why the new atheists are so passionate about what they do, they earn an awful lot more money through their new atheism than they do through their science. Just a little thought there. Why do people buy this rubbish? And he said to me, it is riding on the wave of hatred as a result of 9/11. That's what it is. It is peddling Islamophobia. Now, if you want to vote for Islamophobia, which I think is one of the nastier aspects of modern Britain, then vote for the opposition. I don't. No. Okay, vote for new atheism, because that's what some of it stands for. I would just finish by quoting you. A number of people have mentioned Sam Harris, who is a leading new atheist in the States. I believe, says Sam Harris, that I have successfully argued for the use of torture to cause collateral damage. Given what many of us believe about our war on terrorism, the practice of torture would seem to be not only permissible, but necessary.
And our final guest speaker in tonight's debate is Lord Desai. Lord Desai is the former Labour Party chairman, an Indian-born British economist, and his published works include Rethinking Islam, Ideology of the New Terror. Thank you, Lord Desai.
Just to correct, it was Islamism, not Islam. But then Cambridge students can't read. I don't mind. And I think this proposition before the House has been somewhat misformulated. It should be, we regret that Dawkins wrote a bestseller. And we all hate him for that. Now, my friend Tony Blair once said that, I thought that would get you going. One said, we are all the children of Abraham. And I said, exclude me out of that category, thank you very much. I'm not a child of Abraham. And one of the problems with the Abrahamic faiths is they're very intolerant of each other. You know, talk about hatred. For God's sake, to coin a word. People talk about Judeo-Christian faith. Until 1945, for 1900 years, Christians have hated Jews. And killed them in the most horrible way possible. Even before the Holocaust happened. Before the Holocaust. Years and years and years of killing. So, it's no wonder that we say, we can't stand new atheism. As I was saying, it's amazing. Old atheism has suddenly become fashionable and lovely and cuddly. Old atheism is nice. We don't like new atheism. Why? Because it is contemporary. Right? Old atheism we have forgotten. Who reads Bertrand Russell?
I do.
So for every generation, the religious have to fight the same old battle. Just in case, a few people, a minority of people, become reasonable and tolerant and seekers after truth, we can't have that. You see, religion, interestingly enough, I'll come to you in a minute. Religion has three things, why people go for it. First, denial of death. Everybody, in a sense, we're talking about parents teaching children about religion. But the nice thing about religion is that it wants people to be children forever. And one thing is denial of death. So religion has to believe in afterlife and rebirth and karma and all that sort of stuff, because we can't face death. Secondly, denial of agency. People don't want to believe that they have done any wrong. So they say, oh, God made me do something, or devil made me do something, or my past sins, my previous life. So denial of agency. And lastly, denial of randomness. Everybody really wants a complete explanation of every event. And therefore you have to invoke God, because there is no complete explanation of any phenomenon. There is randomness in the world, right? If you deny randomness, you have to believe in God, because only God can be the full explanation of everything. Now you see, you combine these three sorts of beliefs and you create a universe of children. Some are grown up, some are not, but they are children. Now, every 50 years or so, people like us try gently, sometimes rather harshly. I should also say that every atheist is atheist in respect to his or her own religion. So atheists in monotheism are often as intolerant as the believers, but that is life. You can't get away from it. And so what atheism is saying, and by new atheism, I don't have to tie myself to Dawkins. I don't see why I have to take the definition of new atheism. New atheism is atheism for the current generation. It's atheism for the global world, where we have a variety of religions around. Not just Christianity, not just Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, whatever. They're all false. Or rather, I shouldn't say false, they are all rather simple stories, so that children don't frighten themselves. Of course, if you like that sort of life, you're perfectly free to do so. I'm quite tolerant. And I think untruth should be taught. Lies should be taught. I'm not against lies at all. Life would be very dull if we didn't have any lies. Lies, lies are all right, untruths are all right, but let's live together, lies and truths, and let's hope that, people don't suddenly start regretting somebody else's philosophy. Why are you regretting new atheism? What harm it has done to anybody? Do you think that Dawkins, by saying parents ought not to be allowed to teach children, is going to get anywhere? I mean, is anybody going to take this stuff seriously and allow Dawkins to run the world? I mean, are you kidding? Okay, so somebody writes something, and let's say they're free to write rubbish or write truth. Let's have freedom of the press, freedom of speech. Let's have tolerance. Let's not just be like the religious. Let's be tolerant. Atheists are tolerant people. So let's all be tolerant of truth and untruth. And let's say, please don't regret anything. Let us rejoice in new atheism. Let's rejoice in old atheism. Let's rejoice in religion. Let's rejoice in untruth. Let's rejoice in rubbish. Let's rejoice in paradoxes. And just feel free to do whatever you like, but don't regret anything. Enjoy.
Was it tolerance to refer to the opinions of your opponents as lies and rubbish? And if I walked up to you in the street and called you a liar, would you think it was an act of tolerance?
Of course. I would say that was your view. I would say, if you called me a liar, I would say that's your view. I would say that's your view.
And so, if you'd like to continue the debate in the bar afterwards, you're free to do so.
Yes, please, do.
to you as a liar, you would regard it as offensive in any other form of discourse but this.
No.
We'd like to bring the main speeches and the main debate to a close
I
now.
would say you have your view. You are entitled to be in darkness. What can I do?
Order.
Yes, please. Please.
Now, the reason I feel so strong on making this point of information is because actually religious people...
Actually, sometimes religious people can be harmed by the accusations thrown at them. And this is why this is a serious issue. You are offended that people are picking on Richard Dawkins and using him to label all atheists. Likewise, it is offensive, hurtful, actively hurtful to religious people that you pick on the extremists and use them to label the rest of the religious people. Now let me continue. Let me continue. Religion exists in a larger number of people in society and has existed for a longer period of time. And therefore it has had more time, more chances to fail.
All right, thank you everyone. That's a very dynamic discussion. And it really is time to draw the debate to a close. The speakers have trains to catch. We need to draw the debate to a close for now.
You fall down, you
Lord
hurt
Desai.
yourself. Sometimes life is hurtful. Life is hurtful. It's not always a bed of roses. Grow up.
Thank you. That was one of our more popular and lively discussions, and I do hope that you'll continue to talk about it in the bar afterwards, and that it's probably prompted some interest in some of our future debates. In fact, we do have the chair of the British Humanist Association coming to speak here on Monday. That's Professor Jim Al-Khalili, the celebrity scientist and radio broadcaster. We also have the pleasure to welcome Jill Abramson, ranked by Forbes magazine as the 5th most powerful woman in the world, and she will be coming to speak in her capacity as editor of the New York Times on Wednesday. And finally, we will have His Majesty King Simeon of Bulgaria, the last king of Bulgaria, coming to speak on Friday. I have one final announcement before I will explain how the voting procedure works. We have tickets for our Freshers' Ball, the first Cambridge Ball of the year. These are exclusively and free for new members, so if you have not yet signed up for membership, please do so that you'll be entitled for a free champagne ball at the end of next week. So now our voting tradition is to vote using your feet through the carefully labelled doors, and I will read these carefully this time. It's eyes through the right, nose to the left, and abstention straight through the middle. And if you could just please wait in your seats while the speakers leave the chamber. Thank you very much for coming and for a very lively debate.